Hi, my name is Jason.
And I am Mighty Thor!
Sure. And today we are reviewing
Yggdrasil!
First of all, because this is probably going to come up, there are a lot of Norse words in here. And as we've mentioned many times previously, we don't know how to pronounce these properly. Now, we have consulted with a friend of ours who knows a fair bit about Norse mythology, and he has told us that the proper way to pronounce the name of this game is Yggdrasil. So that's what we're going to use. If this is incorrect, or you think this is incorrect, you know, don't blame us. Yeah. As far as all the other names, we make no guarantees that we will get even close to the proper pronunciation, so please don't hold that against us.
Please don't hold that against us. Children of Midgard, Yggdrasil is a game where you play Norse gods. It's a cooperative form with 1 to 6 of your friends.
Each player takes the role of a Norse god, and they are collectively trying to prevent their enemies from destroying the World Tree, Yggdrasil, and starting the Armageddon, Ragnarok.
This game was published in about 2011 by great mortals known as the Z-Man Game Corporation.
And it was designed by Cedric Lefebvre and Fabrice Rabellino. And again, I apologize if I butchered those names. So first of all, we're going to go over the components for Yggdrasil. This is the game board. These are the god sheets. These are all the cards that come with the game. So these are the enemy cards, artifact cards, and frost giant cards. This is the combat die that comes with the game, so it has various numbers of hammers on each side, and each side is color-coded as well. Here's some of the counters that come with the game. So these are the fire giants, elves, Vikings, and the enemies. These are the miscellaneous cardboard bits that come with the game. So we have the Valkyries, the Veneer, Submerged Island, and the Inaccessible Worlds tokens. And finally, these are the 4 cloth bags that come with the game.
So to set up Yggdrasil, first set up the game board. Place elves in the world of elves equal to the number of players plus 1. Place the Veneer on the first space of the Sacred Realm. Take all 6 enemies and place them on the start over here. Make sure that they're not on the +1 side. They're just on the normal side. Place the artifact cards at the Dwarven Forge, and place the Frost Giants in the Frost Giants world. Place the Valkyries on the Rainbow Bridge. Place the Submerged Island token on the Black Island. Place 12 Fire Giants in the Land of the Fire Giants. Place 5 Vikings in the World of the Dead. Next you're going to create the enemy deck. For beginners, you should probably just use the basic cards. You're not really going to want to use the Ragnarok cards and the Angry Gods cards. Those are particularly nasty and are recommended for advanced players. Shuffle up that deck, place it somewhere nice and accessible. Next you'll need to prepare the bags. So for this you'll need to retrieve your remaining Vikings and Fire Giants. For the white bag you'll be adding 12 Fire Giants and 6 Vikings. For the blue bag, you'll be adding 9 of each, 9 Fire Giants and 9 Vikings. For the green bag, you'll be adding 6 Fire Giants and 12 Vikings. And for the black bag, you'll be adding 3 Fire Giants and 15 Vikings. Make sure you shake up those bags real nice to make sure they're all good and shuffled. And now you are ready to play.
Alright, so now on to gameplay. So first of all, one of the first things you're going to do before you start play is you're each going to get a god sheet. So during the game, each player's turn has 2 phases. First, you draw an enemy card and take the indicated action, and then you may perform up to 3 different actions in 3 different worlds. So for phase 1, each of the enemy cards will indicate one of the enemies that are on the board. So when a card is drawn, you move that particular enemy 1 space forward on the Asgard track. In addition, that enemy's special ability is executed, and that's actually shown at the bottom of the card here. Some of these special abilities actually get more powerful as they move along the board, which is indicated by the number of lightning bolts in each section of Asgard. And we'll go over the individual abilities later. Also, as indicated during setup, there are two special kinds of cards that you can add into the deck if you wish to make things a little bit more difficult. First of all, there are the Ragnarok cards, and there are also the Angry Enemy cards. So each Angry Enemy card essentially looks exactly like the normal enemy cards, except up in the top right-hand corner, there are actually two hash marks here indicating that that enemy moves 2 spaces instead of 1, although their ability only activates once. For the Ragnarok cards, each Ragnarok card shows several of the enemies at the bottom. When that card is drawn, all of the indicated enemies move forward 1 space, but they do not activate their ability. So as you can probably tell, these cards really make things a lot more difficult, so we do really recommend that you don't use these for your first few games. Now for the second part of each player's turn, as mentioned, they can take up to 3 actions. Now each section of the board is indicated by a specific rune, and that indicates a specific world that the gods can visit. So to visit a world is an action. And it should be noted very clearly that you have to visit 3 different worlds. You can't actually visit the same world twice during an individual turn. So now I'm just going to go over all the individual worlds and what they do. First of all, Asgard, the section where the enemies are actually moving along, that is actually a world, and you can go there to attack one of the enemies to force them back. I'll get into combat a little bit later. Next is Midgard, which is also a very important world. Now, when you go to Midgard, and this is actually detailed by icons on the board as well, first of all, you can choose to move the Valkyrie token 1 space forward or backward, or you can just leave them where they are. Your call. After you've moved them, you may take the corresponding bag, so the one that corresponds to the color of the island you're on. You can draw 3 counters, you keep any Viking tokens that you actually draw, and you put back any giants. So as noted during setup, the islands that are further away actually have more Vikings in that bag, so you're probably going to want to advance as much as you can. However, it should also be noted that as you draw Vikings out, the amount of Vikings goes down. So bag management is also a very important part of this game. Next up is the Dwarven Forge, which is basically just this deck right here. So when you go to the Dwarven Forge, you can actually just flip over this deck, look through. You can take any level 1 weapon that is there, so that's the ones with the +1 in the bottom right-hand corner. Or if you already have a level 1 or 2 weapon, you can exchange a level 1 or 2 weapon for the next higher level of that specific weapon. So if you already had a level 1 Mjolnir, then you could exchange it for a level 2 Mjolnir. And if you had a level 2 Mjolnir, you could exchange it for a level 3 Mjolnir. Hey Ken.
Hi there.
That's good. I see you have a hammer.
Yes, it's a very nice hammer. This is Mjolnir, for I am Thor, and Mjolnir is the weapon of Thor.
Yeah, I've actually got one too.
What?
Yeah.
But, Mom, Mjolnir, Thor.
Yeah, the dwarves made me one too.
But I'm Thor.
This is the world of the elves. If you go there, quite simply, you get to take an elf token and put it on your player sheet. Down at the very bottom here is the World of Darkness. If you go to the World of Darkness, you actually get to trade elves or Vikings with one other god. Over here is the World of the Dead. So if you go to the World of the Dead, you can choose up to 5 of the Vikings there and put them into any one bag of your choice. On the other side here is the Kingdom of Fire. If you choose to visit the Kingdom of Fire, you can take 5 counters from any one bag at random and place any giants back on the Kingdom of Fire, returning Vikings to the bag. So this is pretty much the only way to actually remove fire giants from bags, which is pretty important. Over here is the Ice Fortress. So when you go to the Ice Fortress, you can choose to either attack a face-up giant, so the giants will actually be flipped face-up throughout the game. So you can choose to attack one of them, or you can choose to attack just the top card of the deck, so you don't really know what that is before you attack it. And again, that follows the combat rules, which I'll be going over in a little bit. Finally, up here is the Sacred Land. So when you go to the Sacred Land, you can choose one of the following. You can either move the Veneer up one space, or you can execute any action from where he's at down to the end and move him back to the beginning. So for example, if he was up here, you could execute this action, or this action, only one, and he would then move back to the beginning. Alright, so now let's go over combat. Combat in this game is actually pretty simple. So you're always either going to be attacking one of the enemies or Frost Giant. Those are pretty much the only things you can attack here. Now for the Frost Giants, as indicated right here below the Ice Fortress, their strength is always 3, unless there's a buff out. Some of the Frost Giants actually increase this value, but it always starts at a 3. For the enemies, their strength is actually dependent on which section of Asgard they're in, as indicated by the shield beneath each section. So in the first section, they are strength 5. In the second section, they're strength 6. The third section makes them strength 7. And if they're at the end, they are strength 8. And again, this can also be bolstered by the giants, in which case their token would be flipped and they'd actually get a bonus +1 in addition to whatever the mark value is. So, first of all, when you choose to attack someone, you have to indicate which one you're going to attack. Then you can choose to use any number of Viking tokens that you currently have on your player sheet. So you don't discard them yet, but you basically, put them aside and say, this is how many I'm using. Next, you roll the die, and you add the number of axes that are rolled to the Vikings used, and you also add the level of any relevant weapon. So each weapon is keyed to a specific enemy, and you only get that bonus against that specific enemy. Now, if this value between the Vikings, the axes, and the value of any weapons equals or exceeds the strength of the enemy you're attacking, then you win. So in the case of one of the enemies, you actually push them back one space. In the case of a Frost Giant, you actually just kill it, and it's put out of play. If this does not equal or exceed this value, and you have any elves on your sheet, you can actually discard elf tokens at this point to add +1 to your roll. So that's why elves are a little bit more valuable than Vikings, because Vikings you always have to use them beforehand, and you have to kind of bank on the idea that you might not roll well, whereas elves you can kind of tweak your score a little bit. Finally, at the end of combat, any Vikings used are returned to the world of the dead, and any elves used are returned to the world of the elves. Next we're going to go over the Frost Giants. So each Frost Giant, as it indicated, has a special ability marked in the middle of their card. There are 5 different types of abilities. So first of all, some of them will have a picture of a rune with an X through it. That means that the world corresponding to that rune, in this case the Kingdom of Fire, is unavailable until that Frost Giant is removed from play. So you would actually take one of the unavailable world markers and place it over the world's rune on the board just to indicate that. One of these giants also cancels the god's abilities. This means that the god's special abilities cannot be used while this giant is in play. So that's a particularly nasty one. There's also a giant that prevents the rolling of the die during combat. So this means that as long as this giant is in play, you are only allowed to use Vikings, elves, and weapons during combat. You cannot roll the die. Several of the giants will actually increase the strength of one of the enemies, as indicated before. In this case, it shows a picture of Hell and a +1. So you would actually flip Hell over to show the +1 side. And you flip it back as soon as that Frost Giant is removed. There is a giant that actually prevents access to the submerged island. So typically, you can't actually draw from the bag where the submerged island token is in Midgard here. However, you can at least move over it if you need to get by it. When this giant is in play, you actually flip this over to the whirlpool side, and the Valkyries can no longer go past that point until this giant is removed. And finally, there is a frost giant that increases the strength of all of the other frost giants. And that's just, it shows a little snowflake with a +1. So that makes the strength of the giants 4 instead of 3 when you have to go defeat them. You'll also note that each giant at the very bottom of the card has a piece of a rune on it. So whenever a giant is defeated, they're actually removed from play and they're set aside on usually the opposite side of the board just to, you know, keep them separate from the other giants so you don't get confused. So whenever you defeat a giant, you just make sure that you group the like runes together. And there are 4 parts to each rune. Now, as soon as the entire rune is completed, so once you've defeated the giants that make up that rune, the effect of that rune takes place immediately. So these are the 4 runes. This is what they look like when they're completed. And I'll just go over each one briefly. So as soon as this one is completed, you can take up to 15 Vikings from the World of the Dead and distribute them as you wish amongst all of the gods. For this one, the gods actually don't have to draw an enemy card for the next 3 turns, so it gives you a bit of a reprieve. This sigil allows you to move 1 enemy 3 spaces back. And finally, this one allows you to move 3 enemies 1 space back each. So next I'm going to go over the abilities of the individual enemies, and basically what happens when they move. So first of all, we have Hell. So when Hell moves, you actually, first of all, roll the die. Now, as mentioned, each side of the die, in addition to having the axes on it, also has a color on it. And these colors correspond to one of the bags. So in this case, this is showing the white bag. So you take that bag, and you remove a number of Vikings from the bag equal to the power level of the ability. So again, the power level is determined by what space they're moving into. So the first 2 spaces, they actually have 1 lightning bolt, so that means it would be 1 Viking. The second area here has 2 lightning bolts, so it would be 2 Vikings, etc. Next up is Surt. Surt is very similar, actually, in that you roll the die, that indicates a bag, and in this case, you add a number of fire giants to the bag equal to the power of the ability. Next up is Jormungand. So his ability is actually independent of the power, so you can just ignore that. What he does is, as soon as he moves, you roll the die, you move the submerged island token to that island, so in this case it will move to the Black Island, which is where it already is, and in addition, the Valkyries move back to the Rainbow Island. For Loki, whenever he moves, you draw a number of giant cards from the Frost Giant deck equal to the power of the ability, and you place them face up next to the board, and their abilities take effect immediately. So this is a particularly insidious power because if he gets all the way to the end here, you're drawing 3 Frost Giants, and the Frost Giants can be pretty nasty. Next up is Nidhogg. His ability is actually probably one of the worst. He can really screw you over. Basically, whenever he moves, he also brings the other enemy that's furthest back forward 1 space. So this can actually be him. If he's the furthest back, he would just essentially move an extra space. And if there's a tie, like in this case, the players can actually choose which enemy moves. And again, this is independent of the power level. Finally, we have Fenrir, who you really don't want to see come up. He's going to eat up most of your turn. As soon as he comes up, for each action after that, you have to roll the die until one of the indicated results comes up. And it gets harder and harder to roll the appropriate thing as the power level goes up. So at the first level, the only thing that doesn't calm him down is the black. roll. And basically, you have to keep using actions until one of the appropriate dice rolls comes up. Next, we're going to go over the gods' abilities. Each god basically has a special ability that they can use throughout the game. So first of all is Odin. For Odin, whenever he draws enemy cards at the start of his turn, he actually draws 2 cards. He can look at both of them, and he can choose which one he plays during that turn. In addition, the other card, he can choose to either place it on the top or the bottom of the deck. So this is actually a very powerful ability. Thor, as one might expect, is very good at fighting. His ability is very simple. He gets a +1 to any combat he initiates during his turn. Next up is Tyr. Whenever Tyr has to roll the die, be it for an enemy card or for combat, he actually gets to roll 2 times and choose which of the 2 results he uses. Next is Heimdall. Whenever he actually goes to Midgard to take Vikings from the bags, he actually gets to draw 4 tokens instead of 3, so he has a better chance of getting some Vikings. Frey's ability is also very simple, although it's actually pretty potent. Frey actually gets 4 actions each turn instead of the standard 3. And finally there's Freya, who also has a pretty potent ability. As noted before, typically you can only visit different worlds during your turn, so you have to visit 3 different worlds. Freya, however, can actually use 2 of her actions in the same world. So finally, ending the game. So the gods win at the end of the turn where the last enemy card is drawn. And the gods lose if at the end of any turn there are 5 enemies beyond the Wall of Asgard, and that's indicated by the huge 5 here. If there are 3 enemies beyond the Door of Valhalla, which is here, or if there is a single enemy basically in Odin's residence. It should be noted, and this is very important, that this occurs at the end of the turn. So even if an enemy did get all the way to Odin's residence, you still have until the end of the turn to move them back. So there are various things you could do. You could, attack him. You could try and finish one of the runes that let you move them back. So you have options there. It's not as soon as he moves there, you lose. Alright, so now on to example turns. So first of all, we have to pick our gods. So Ken, pick away.
Alright, I'm going to choose the mighty Thor!
Alright, and I have Heimdall.
That's a good second choice.
Okay. Alright, so now we have to determine who gets to go first. So, Dungeon Quest?
Dungeon Quest. Hoo ha ha!
Alrighty.
So the first thing you must do is draw an enemy card. I've drawn Fenrir.
Oh, the fun one. So he moves up 1. And now Kenny gets 3 actions per turn. However, he has to use those actions to calm Fenrir down first. So his first action. Alright, so Fenrir is calmed down. He has 2 actions remaining.
Well, that's unfortunate. I'm going to choose... First off, I'm going to go to the Dwarven Forge, pick up a weapon. Because I am the mighty Thor, I'm going to choose Mjolnir. And for my second action, I'm going to choose to go to Midgard to push the Valkyries along the Rainbow Bridge and pull some dudes from the bag. Choosing 3, I actually got fairly lucky. I got 2 Vikings and 1 Frost Giant, so the Frost Giant goes back, or Fire Giant rather. Fire Giant goes back in the bag. Alright, that was me. Jason.
Alright, so I have to draw an enemy card first. I also drew Fenrir.
Oh no.
That's awesome. Alright, so my first action. Alright, I've calmed him down. So again, I only get 2 actions as well. Kind of getting a little concerned about him being up this far. So first of all, I think I'm going to go and try and get some Vikings. So I'm going to go to Midgard for my second action. So I'm going to move the Valkyries over to the Blue Island, which means I get to draw from the blue bag now. And because of Heimdall's ability, I actually get to draw 4 counters instead of the standard 3. So I have a better chance of actually getting some Vikings. Alright, so I ended up with 2 Vikings and 2 Fire Giants, so the 2 Vikings go on my player sheet, 2 Fire Giants go back in the bag. At this point, it's probably not advantageous for me to even attack Fenrir because I need to use both of my Vikings and then roll a 3 on the die. So, I think I'm actually going to go to the Dwarven Forge as well, and I'm going to pick up Gleipnir, which is the level 1 weapon that is used against Fenrir. And that is the end of my turn.
Alright, my turn. I'm going to pull up an enemy card. It's
So
going to be Hell.
Yeah.
So when Hell moves up, I'm rolling the die.
So that indicates the green bag. So because she is moving into the 1 lightning bolt area, 1 Viking is removed from the bag and put back in the world of the dead.
Alright, so since Jason has the weapon for Fenrir, I'm not really too worried about him at this moment. So I'm going to go to the Dwarven Forge and pick up the weapon against Hell. And which is Dropnir, I believe? Dropnir? It's a ring. My second action will be to go to Midgard, to the Green Island. And I got 2 Vikings and a Fire Giant. My last action is going to be to combat Hell. So I have a +1 against her for having the weapon that would go against her. I have several Vikings, and I also just get a straight up +1 because I'm Thor. Not willing to let anything up to chance, I'm actually going to spend 3 Vikings, which plus my +2 from my various bonuses is going to give me a total of 5, which is going to be enough to drive back Hell. So I'm not even going to be rolling a die. If I had, I would have rolled a 3 though, so seems like kind of a sore waste of Vikings. But it's accomplished no less. That's the end of my turn. Jason's up.
Alright, so I draw my enemy card, and it is Surt. So he moves forward 1, and that means I have to roll the die. So I got blue. So 1 Fire Giant is added to the blue bag, and it's 1 because, again, there's 1 lightning bolt. Alright, so obviously I'm going to be taking care of Fenrir here. So the best thing for me to do is probably to gear up for that. I already have a couple of Vikings. First of all, I'm going to go to the world of the elves, and I'm going to get an elf. They're always useful. Next, I'm going to go to the Dwarven Forge. I'm actually going to trade in the level 1 version of Gleipnir and take the level 2 version. Like so. And finally, for my third action, I'm going to choose to go to Asgard, and I'm going to combat Fenrir. Again, he has a combat value of 5. I have +2 from the weapon. I'm going to choose to use both of my Vikings. So I'm going to roll the die. I get a 0. Now currently my combat strength is 4, so currently I would not beat him. However, I do have the elf, which you can actually use after the fact. So I'm actually going to discard the elf to give myself +1, which means that I'm now at 5, and I can drop him back. So these Vikings are sent back to the world of the dead, and my turn is over.
Alright, the Mighty Thor. Nidhogg.
Right.
Yeah. So Nidhogg goes forward. When Nidhogg goes forward, he actually pulls the furthest god back with him. So in this case, it would be a tie between these 3. Let's say Hell, because I can deal with actually, let's pull up him. The special ability does not activate, right?
No.
No, okay. Jormungand is pulled forward with Nidhogg. The snakes are kind of keeping together. And for my turn, first I'm going to go to the Dwarven Forge. I'm going to get the level 2 version of Mjolnir. I'm going to go to Midgard, pull some Vikings from the Green Island, and only 1 Viking this time. And finally, I'm going to fight. I'm going to fight Yeah, I'll fight Jormungand. So I have automatically I have a +3 because of Mjolnir and my +1 bonus. I have 2 Vikings. I feel a little bit more lucky. I'm going to spend 1 Viking on this and see if I can roll anything but a blank. Which I can. Thor rolls very well, apparently. So he goes back, and the day is saved for now.
Alright, so I draw my enemy card. Ironically, I get Jormungand.
Oh, I'll take him down next time, too.
So he moves forward. And again, his ability is not linked to the power level, so it just happens. So first of all, the Valkyries go back to the Rainbow Island. Next, I roll a die, and the green island is now submerged. So again, you can actually move on to that and through it, but we can't actually draw anything from that bag as long as it's submerged. Alright, so, again, I feel like I should be on Fenrir duty, since that's what I have the weapon for. So, first of all, I'm actually going to go to Midgard. So I'm going to move forward 1. I'm on the White Island, so again, I get to draw 4 counters, because I'm Heimdall. So I've got 2 Vikings and 2 Fire Giants. The Fire Giants go back in the bag. 2 Vikings go on my player sheet. Alright, so for my second action, I'm actually going to go back to the Dwarven Forge, and I am going to level up Gleipnir to the 3rd level. Here we go. And finally, again, I'm going to go to Asgard, and I am going to attack Fenrir. So in this case, I'm also feeling a bit lucky, so I'm only going to actually use 1 of my Vikings. So as long as I roll anything but a blank. And I rolled a blank. That's rather unfortunate. So unfortunately I don't have any elves to save myself this time, so the Viking goes away and Fenrir does not move back. So
How
that
unfortunate.
is the... Yeah, well, it happens. So that is the end of my turn. Alright, so Ken, what do you think of this game?
I wanted my own hammer. Yeah, so, as usual, I love the art. That's one thing I always point out with games, I know, but this game is no exception. The first time I saw the board, I was like, oh! Because it looks like a matte painting that should just be on your wall somewhere with just a little bit of iconography on it. Mm-hmm. And the iconography, oh my goodness, the iconography in this is great. There's not too many things. Sometimes it can get a little confusing. And you do have to refer to the sheet a few times just to kind of get over what each individual thing means. But after you've got that down, you don't have to look at anything anymore. You can just look at something and say, it means this.
Mm-hmm. As for my part, I mean, I really like this game. I'm really glad I picked it up. And, you know, as Kenny mentioned, the iconography, I like that. And I really feel, though, that their objective there wasn't to, you know, explain everything through the icons, but more to remind you. And I think it really works well there. The rules are very well organized. They don't really waste any space. There isn't even a cover, which is something Kenny commented on when he saw it. So, you know, it's very utilitarian. But, you know, everything's laid out very well and explains exactly how things go. It's a very simple game, which I love. I mean, there's really only two phases to a turn. Things go pretty quick, as you probably saw in the example turns. And, yeah, no, overall, it is a really great game. I highly recommend it.
My only real beef with this game, and it really is my only real beef with this game, because otherwise it's pretty much fantastic. I think this game is almost spotless. But my only real beef with this game is that it is notably more difficult with more players. If you're playing this as a one-player game, you probably wouldn't have that much trouble with it at all, actually, because as one god, you could kind of control the board really easily and just know what to do, when to do it. I remember we played it with about 5 people one time, and, I mean, everybody specializes in essentially one god that they need to defeat or push back and such. But when you get to the point where one person is the only person that can really reasonably deal with one of the 6 gods that are stomping forward, and you have to wait 5 turns before you can get back around to them to actually do anything about it, it gets a little difficult.
It can, yeah.
It's definitely harsh at that point.
Alright, so Ken, what do you think?
I'm going to have to give this game I think I'll have to give it a 4.5. I think, like I said, I think this game is damn near spotless. The only thing that bothers me is how the difficulty scales with more players, and really, realistically, that's usually true of most games anyway, so I can't really fault this one for it, but with this one it's fairly notable. In a two-player game like the one me and Jason were playing, there's like no trouble whatsoever just keeping things at bay. But in the larger games, it is really hard to keep those gods at bay because they can really give you a run for your money.
I'm personally going to give this a 5 out of 5, actually.
Ooh, 5 out of 5.
Because, like I said, I really enjoy this game. I'm very happy that I picked it up. It was well worth the money, and as far as the difficulty goes, I can see where Ken's coming from. But at the same time, I mean, cooperative games are always ridiculously hard.
That's a fair point.
This one just happens to scale with the number of players, as opposed to a lot of games where it's pretty much just really, really hard throughout. So, personally, I don't find that to be that big a deal.
Alright, that's fairly solid, and that's going to give us a grand total of 9.5 meeples. Not quite a perfect game, but pretty damn close. Definitely worth your money.
Absolutely. So that's it for Yggdrasil, and join us next time for Musketeers of the King.
Dear Midgardians, see you next time, and until then, have good games.